We were misled. Number 10. The world's oldest pyramid, Gunung Padang. Imagine a dense emerald jungle in West Java, Indonesia. Rising from the mist is a massive hill, Gunung Padang, covered in shattered columnar stones. For decades, locals thought it was just a sacred ancestor site. But recently, a sensational narrative took the internet by storm, fueled by Netflix documentaries and rogue geologists. The claim? This isn't a hill. It's a 25,000-year-old pyramid burying a lost chamber of advanced technology that predates the Ice Age. If true, it means human civilization didn't start in Mesopotamia. It started here, effectively rewriting every history book in existence. But before you throw out your textbooks, let's look at the geology. The core argument for the pyramid theory relies on ground-penetrating radar scans showing layers of construction deep underground. However, in 2024 and 2025, independent geologists pushed back hard. Those layers are textbook examples of natural volcanic cooling. When magma cools, it cracks into hexagonal columns. The very masonry proponents claim is man-made. Furthermore, the carbon dating of the soil between these rocks does go back 20,000 years. But that's just organic matter trapped in natural sediment, not mortar placed by human hands. The actual archaeological surface layer? It's impressive, but it dates to around 200 AD, roughly contemporary with the Roman Empire, not Atlantis. The scientific consensus is actually a compromise, though the alternative history crowd hates it. Gunung Padang is a magnificent terraced sanctuary modified by humans, but it sits on top of an extinct volcano that nature shaped, not lost aliens. We desperately want to find a prehistoric Wakanda to make the past feel magical. But the reality is that the most impressive structures on Earth, volcanoes, are built by the planet itself, and no amount of wishing will turn a lava dome into a spaceship. Number 9. Egyptians moving megaliths. Stand at the base of the Great Pyramid of Giza. You are looking at 2.3 million stone blocks, some weighing upwards of 80 tons. For centuries, this sheer scale has broken the brains of tourists and historians alike. How could Bronze Age people, who didn't even have the wheel as we know it, drag these leviathans across miles of desert sand? The impossibility of the task has spawned an entire industry of ancient alien theories, suggesting acoustic levitation, lost anti-gravity tech, or interference from the stars. It's the ultimate argument from incredulity. I can't do it, so they couldn't have either. But the answer has been staring us in the face for 4,000 years, painted on the wall of the tomb of Jehuti-Hotep. The artwork clearly depicts a colossal statue being dragged on a sledge by 172 men. But look closer at the figure standing on the front of the sledge. He isn't just cheering, he's pouring water onto the sand in front of the runners. Physicists from the University of Amsterdam finally tested this in the lab. Dry sand piles up in front of a sledge, creating friction that makes movement impossible. But wetting the sand with the precise amount of water creates capillary bridges that bind the grains together, doubling the stiffness of the sand and reducing friction by 50%. We ignored the solution because it was too boring. We wanted a sci-fi explanation involving lasers and saucers. Instead, the greatest engineering feat in human history was accomplished with a wooden sled, a lot of rope, and a guy with a bucket. It turns out that understanding basic fluid dynamics is a lot more useful than waiting for little green men to do your heavy lifting. Picture the North Atlantic during the height of the last ice age, 20,000 years ago. It is a frozen, hostile hellscape. Now imagine a small boat made of animal skins navigating between massive icebergs. Inside are not Asians crossing the Bering Strait, but white Europeans from present-day France and Spain. This is the Solutrean hypothesis, the idea that the first Americans were actually the Solutrean people of Europe who crossed the Atlantic ice shelf millennia before anyone else. It's a seductive, cinematic image that has been weaponized in modern political debates about race and indigenous rights. The evidence for this was always thin, relying entirely on the fact that the Solutrean stone tools look vaguely similar to the famous Clovis points found in America. But in 2025, the genetic data has become a sledgehammer that shatters this theory. We have now sequenced the genomes of ancient skeletons from the Solutrean period in Europe and the earliest Paleo-Americans. The result? Zero match. There is no European DNA markers in the earliest Americans. Furthermore, there's a 5,000-year time gap between the last Solutrean tool in Europe and the first Clovis tool in America. That's like saying the iPhone was inspired by a telegraph machine from the Middle Ages. The white first theory relies on a visual coincidence of stone chipping, completely ignoring the biological reality. Convergent evolution happens in technology just as it does in nature. Two different groups can figure out that a sharp, pointy rock is a good idea without meeting each other. The Solutrean hypothesis isn't history, it's a Rorschach test where people see the reflection of their own identity politics in a pile of ancient stones. Fly over the Pisco Valley in Peru and you will see something that looks like a glitch in the matrix. Carved into the arid limestone rock is a band of over 5,000 man-sized holes stretching for nearly a mile. They snake up mountains and down into valleys in a rigid mathematical pattern. From the air, it looks like a machine gun strafed the Earth from orbit, or perhaps a massive coded message meant to be read by gods in the sky. For years, this alien runway has been the darling of mystery forums, baffling archaeologists who couldn't find a single bone or tool inside them. The mystery persisted because we were looking for something complex. Recent excavations and soil analysis inside the holes found trace amounts of pollen and organic decay consistent with bean storage. This wasn't a star map, it was a state-sponsored tax infrastructure. The Inca and their predecessors required tribute. These holes were likely intended to be colossal grain silos, sealed with clay to protect food surplus. The reason they look so weird and empty? The project was likely abandoned before completion, or the goods were moved. The code is just the logical spacing required for individual storage units. It is the ultimate anticlimax. We looked down from satellites and saw a message to the cosmos. The ancient Peruvians looked down and saw a pantry. It is a harsh reminder that just because a structure looks mysterious to us doesn't mean its function wasn't incredibly mundane to the people who built it. Sometimes a hole is just a hole. Number 6. The Maiden Castle Massacre. The year is 43 AD. The Roman war machine has landed in Britain. They march on Maiden Castle, a massive Iron Age hill fort. In the 1930s, archaeologist Mortimer Wheeler excavated the site and painted a picture of a Hollywood-style bloodbath. He described a war cemetery filled with skeletons, hacked to pieces, spines pierced by Roman ballista bolts, the defenders slaughtered in a final heroic stand against the imperial legions. For nearly a century, this has been the defining story of the Roman conquest, a brutal, sudden annihilation of the native Britons. But modern forensics has reopened the case files, and the massacre is unraveling. Reanalysis of the skeletons shows that many of the war wounds show signs of healing, meaning these injuries happened weeks or months before death, not in a single final battle. The hasty graves were actually dug with care, following traditional burial rites that would be impossible in the heat of a slaughter. The population wasn't wiped out in an afternoon. The evidence suggests a period of low-level skirmishing followed by a surrender and eventual assimilation. The dramatic war cemetery was just a regular cemetery used during a violent era. Wheeler was a brilliant storyteller who had just come out of World War I. He projected the horror of modern trench warfare onto the Iron Age. The reality of the Roman conquest was likely less Braveheart and more bureaucratic takeover. We crave the drama of the last stand, but the truth is usually a slow, uncomfortable transition of power where the losers don't die, they just start paying taxes. Number 5. Poverty Point. Travel to northeast Louisiana, circa 1600 BC. According to the traditional ladder of progress model of history, humans at this time in North America were simple, wandering hunter-gatherers, living in small bands, barely scraping by. They certainly didn't have the organization to build cities. Yet here stands Poverty Point, a massive complex of 6 concentric earthen ridges stretching 3/4 of a mile wide, requiring the movement of 750,000 cubic meters of earth. It defies the rulebook. It is an engineering marvel that shouldn't exist without agriculture, kings, or a standing army. The myth here is the academic assumption that complexity requires farming. Archaeologists have found zero evidence of maize or large-scale agriculture at Poverty Point. These people were eating fish, deer, and nuts, yet they built a site that rivals the monuments of early Egypt. The evidence suggests that Poverty Point was a pilgrimage center, a Burning Man of the ancient world. Analysis of stone tools found at the site shows materials brought from the Ohio River Valley and the Appalachian Mountains hundreds of miles away. It was a trade and spiritual hub built by a confederation of equals, not slaves driven by a tyrant. This site proves that the agricultural revolution wasn't the only path to civilization. We assume that people need to be forced by hunger or a dictator to build great things. Poverty Point proves that humans will move mountains simply because they want to gather, trade, and party. The drive to socialize is older and stronger than the drive to farm.
Number 4. The Plague of Akhenaten, Amarna. In the middle of the Egyptian desert lies the ruins of Akhenaten, the city built by the heretic pharaoh Akhenaten. The art from this period is bizarre: humans with elongated skulls, pot bellies, and spindly limbs. For decades, the myth was that this was a utopian city of light, a spiritual revolution where the pharaoh and his family, possibly suffering from Marfan syndrome or alien genetic tampering, lived in harmony with the sun disk Aten. It is romanticized as the first attempt at monotheism, a beautiful dream cut short by jealous priests. The excavation of the commoners' cemeteries in Amarna tells a horror story that shatters the utopia. The bones of the workers reveal a life of agonizing torment. Over 70% of the children died before adulthood. The skeletons show signs of severe malnutrition, anemia, and spinal trauma from carrying heavy loads at a young age. But the smoking gun found recently is evidence of a virulent epidemic, likely malaria or bubonic plague, that swept through the cramped, hastily built city. The alien art style might not be stylistic. It might be a reflection of a sick, dying population led by a fanatic who worked them to death in a disease incubator. Akhenaten didn't build a paradise, he built a labor camp in a vector zone. The collapse of his city wasn't a theological conspiracy, it was a biological inevitability. We look at the gold masks and forget the pile of small, broken bodies it cost to make them. History is written by the survivors, but the archaeology is written by the victims. Number 3. Early medieval England isolation. Close your eyes and picture Anglo-Saxon England. You probably see a homogeneous, isolated society of white warriors in mead halls, protecting their pure lineage from outsiders. This concept of an insular, early medieval England has been the bedrock of British national identity for centuries. It suggests a clear, unbroken line of ancestry that remained untouched until the Vikings or Normans showed up. It's a comfortable, tidy narrative of us versus them that has persisted since the Victorian era. Science just kicked the door down. A massive archaeogenetic study published recently analyzed hundreds of individuals from this period. The results were shocking. Up to 75% of the gene pool in eastern England was replaced or mixed with migrants from the North Sea zone, Germany, Denmark, and Netherlands within a few generations. But even more surprising, the presence of outliers. We are finding skeletons in rural English graveyards with ancestry from West Africa and the Eastern Mediterranean. These weren't just slaves, they were buried with grave goods, integrated into the community. England was a migration superhighway, not a fortress. The idea of a pure ancestral past is a biological fiction. The English identity was a melting pot from the moment it began. We project our modern borders onto the past, but DNA doesn't care about maps. The ancestors of the English were a chaotic mix of boat people, refugees, and travelers. Isolation is the myth, migration is the norm.
Now this is definitely a doozy. In 1926, a skeleton was found in a tomb in Ephesus, Turkey. The tomb was octagonal, a shape associated with the lighthouse of Alexandria. This led to a breathless theory. This was Arsinoe IV, the younger sister and rival of Cleopatra, famously murdered on the steps of a temple. In the 1990s and 2000s, forensic reconstructionists claimed the skull measurements proved Arsinoe had African ancestry, sparking a massive media firestorm about the race of Cleopatra herself. Cleopatra was black became a headline, pinned almost entirely on this one skull. Here is the heartbreaking reality check. The skull is gone. It was lost in Germany during World War II. All those modern reconstructions, they were based on photos and measurements taken in the 1920s, an era when race science was pseudoscientific garbage. Modern DNA analysis of the rest of the skeleton, which was rediscovered without the head, was attempted, but the DNA was too degraded to yield results. Furthermore, the carbon dating of the bones suggests the body is 200 years too young to be Arsinoe. The entire debate is based on a ghost, a missing object, and bad math. We are desperate to assign a modern racial category to Cleopatra to validate our own identities, but relying on lost evidence and 1920s phrenology isn't science, it's wishful thinking. The twist isn't that we know the answer, it's that we literally lost the only clue. Sometimes history doesn't give you a revelation, it just gives you an empty box and a question mark. The year is 900 AD. The Maya civilization, one of the most sophisticated on Earth, vanishes. The great cities of Tikal and Calakmul are abandoned to the jungle. The Maya collapse is the ultimate historical cautionary tale used to scare us about climate change, overpopulation, and moral decay. The myth is that the Maya people died out, disappearing off the face of the earth in a mysterious, cataclysmic event. It is the favorite topic of doomsday preppers who think it validates their bunkers. The debunk is simple. Look at the map of Guatemala and Mexico today. There are over 7 million Maya people still speaking Maya languages living in the same region. The collapse was a political collapse, not a biological extinction. The divine kings system failed due to drought and warfare, so the people simply walked away. They abandoned the massive stone cities, which were tax traps anyway, and moved to the coasts or formed smaller, more resilient village networks. They didn't die, they fired their government. The civilization transformed and survived for another 600 years until the Spanish arrived, and even then they fought back for centuries. We are obsessed with the idea that civilizations die when their monuments fall into ruin, but that's because we focus on the rulers, not the people. The Maya didn't disappear, they just stopped building pyramids for guys who couldn't make it rain. The ultimate survival strategy isn't holding on to the past, it's knowing when to abandon a sinking ship and start over. We're not done yet. I have to address the elephant in the room, or rather, the olive tree in the trench. If you've been on YouTube lately, you've seen the viral outrage about Gobekli Tepe, the world's oldest temple. Influencers like Bright Insight have claimed that the site is being destroyed by the planting of olive trees, alleging a globalist cover-up to bury human history and hide the truth about the site's age. The visuals are terrifying, trees planted right on top of the archaeology. Here is the insider truth from the actual site reports in 2025. The trees are being planted, yes, but they are located in the transition zone, far away from the T-pillar excavations. The soil there is incredibly unstable. Without root systems to hold the earth, the runoff from heavy rains threatens to flood the actual archaeological pits downhill. The trees are not a weapon, they are a shield. The concrete seen in videos? It's a standard mixture of lime and sand used to cap non-archaeological layers to prevent erosion, a technique used at every dig site from Rome to Jericho. The conspiracy theory generates millions of views because it positions the viewer as a warrior for truth against a shadowy elite. But the boring reality is that archaeology is mostly about drainage management. We want a villain trying to erase the past, but the only thing the site managers are fighting is gravity. Sometimes a tree is just a tree, and the internet is just a place where anger travels faster than facts. So, did we shatter your timeline? Good. History isn't a statue, it's a construction site. If you want to keep rebuilding your worldview with us, hit that sub button. And let me know in the comments, regarding that last point, do you trust the official explanation, or is the olive oil industry up to something sinister? I'll see you in the next one. Stay curious.